Hello, everybody. I'm your host, Zenitsu, and you're listening to the Digi Talks podcast, the show that covers various topics from news to meta developments and everything in between for the fine folks who love the Digimon trading card game. Just as a quick reminder, I do try to stream this live over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu, and it's also uploaded as a YouTube video under the channel of Zenitsu while being on various podcasting platforms like Spotify for your viewing and listening pleasure. Please feel free to leave that rating, like, subscribe, follow, review, whatever, depending on the platform that you're listening on. It really does help support the podcast. Today, I am back with Jay Stewart, and this is, well, technically, this is going to be our New Year's special, even though it's going to be coming out, like, the day after New Year's. So, Happy New Year's, everyone. This is going to be pre-recorded because I will be playing in Nationals and unable to, record at our usual time frame. So, yeah, that'll be fun. Going to Nationals. But today we are going to be hitting on kind of three little topics. The main three topics that we have going on today is going to be a New Year's resolution, because it's New Year's. We always gotta make New Year's resolutions, even though we will almost never keep them. We're going to be hitting on some of the new spoilers, as always, and we're going to be talking about the Nationals meta, because, that's something some players are going to be playing, and even though this format is kind of closing and wrapping up, it's always good to know how we got here, what's actually going to be viable, and why things are viable to begin with. So, those are all very good things. Yes, it might be kind of retreading some grounds, but it's kind of important to know those grounds going forward as we make our way closer to unification. So, starting things off with kind of the whole New Year's vibe is probably just the question of the week, and what is your TCG New Year's resolution? So, anyone, feel free to type in the comments down below or in the chat. Whatever your New Year's resolution is, I'd love to hear them, just to kind of see where your mindset is going forward. So, what's your New Year's resolution, Jay Stewart?
So I think with me for my New Year's resolution, I do want to try to, so far I haven't been able to get a Nats invite. Like every year I keep telling myself I want to, do better. I want to get that invite just so I could at least have the experience. I wouldn't care if I won Nats or anything. I mean, it'd be awesome if I could, but to me, it's like I just want to be there. I want to experience everything with everyone. And every year I've been getting a little bit better and better. I think this last year, the closest I got was top 10 at a store regionals. So it was just a few spots away. So I'm hoping for my New Year's resolution. I want to get that Nats invite this year, hopefully. And I'm hoping that they're going to be doing a lot more of the store regionals that I could actually, because I feel like that's going to be my best shot at trying to get my Nats invite.
Yeah, I think to kind of expand the question of the week and the New Year's vibe is okay, so obviously you want to get to Nationals. That's your big New Year's resolution. What would be you kind of alluded to it. I don't know if it actually is your wish list, but what is one wish going into 2025 that you want Bandai to do?
Oh, that's my bad. So yeah, it is also just doing more store regionals and just more ways to get invites, because what we saw on their announcement of the Digimon TCG live stream, that they do plan on doing 2 Nats, it looks like, for us. So it's hopefully that means they're going to be upping the amount of chances to get your Nats invites, if that makes sense. Or so.
Yeah, we still have a long ways to go before we actually know the full picture, but I think just sharing the sentiment of more in-store play and supporting local scenes definitely is nice. And because unfortunately I did get a little bit of bad news over the past weekend that one of my buddy's stores is stopping supporting Digimon. So any way that we could keep whatever we have alive is very good. That's obviously on the store's decision to kill Digimon. I don't know what the scene's like down over there by them. to warrant them making that type of decision, but it's not like that's an uncommon thing, because I've personally changed locals 3 times because either the store got shut down, they decided to stop playing and supporting the game, or what be it. The fact that I had to change stores so many times is very alarming, and I would like to not change stores anymore if possible. So, yeah. But going into my New Year's resolution, this is going to be really difficult because my moves are based on Bandai's moves. So I found my formula, so to say, to the road to nationals. And yes, the secret is event spamming. I just play in all of the online events. I play in as many of the store regionals that I can participate in, because statistically, I do have an above 50% win rate. It's not a hugely above 50% win rate, but because I do have that average win rate, my trick to getting into nationals is literally just spam events, and I'll eventually have a good string of luck to be able to get there. It's worked. This is the 3rd time I'm going to nationals, so it's worked 3 times already. So take that advice as you will, anyone who's listening. I know not everyone has the luxury of just spamming all of the events, so I do understand that I am and have been in a pretty privileged position to be able to achieve that. But my competitive future literally depends on if Bandai is actually going to make the game good, because it's no secret that I have been a very Debbie Downer, because the game has progressively become less fun as time has gone on. So going into my wish for Bandai, kind of bouncing off of some of the sentiments from previous episodes, I want them to be more proactive or better at being reactive to when problems with the game emerge. So I understand card design is just always going to get out of whack, and asking them not to print stupid cards is way too much to ask for, unfortunately, especially at this point, because the power level's already gotten so high, and players have already gotten, and probably the designers have already gotten complacent with the power level that is, in quotation marks, acceptable. Yeah, because yes, power creep is a thing, so it's generally sometimes hard to control and stop, so I'm not even going to bother harping on poor design in the future cards, because some of them I do think are kind of stupid, and they shouldn't have been made, but they're made, and here we are anyway. So my wish to Bandai is be more proactive or reactive when it comes to your ban and restriction list. Every main set, we borderline need one, just like Dragon Ball Fusion, or not Fusion World, just like Dragon Ball Masters. We need a ban and restriction list more often than what we've been getting. Yes, it requires Bandai to actually pay attention to us, and that's something they've very clearly told us that they don't want to do. They give us just the bare minimum and tell us, like, hey, you're good, and they're very complacent with the state of the game, but I, as a player, want the game to be better. And if they're going to keep printing stupid cards, they need the ability to be more proactive / reactive in getting rid of dumb cards to try to keep the game as healthy as possible. So my competitive future depends on if they're actually able to accomplish that. If they're not, I'm not even going to attempt to go to nationals next year. I don't think it's worth it for me personally. But my New Year's resolution is to try to, I guess this is going to sound really bad, is to try to be more positive about the game, with the hopes that the game is going to get better.
Yeah, just to add on about your whole the ban restrictions thing too, is that I know a lot of the times, like, I know JP players have always said in the past that, oh, Bandai likes playing into America, like, when it comes to that stuff, but a lot of times it's always felt like that the ban and restriction list to me has always been more based on what JP has been doing, I guess, if that makes sense. Because I think the only time it actually had a ban and restriction list that was like meant for more of us was back when blue hybrids was still meta relevant for us back in BT8, like, or BT9, I guess, or whatever it was. So I'm hoping that when they do, if they do, more bans and restriction lists, they're looking at everybody and not just JP now, especially since we're going to be all playing the same format.
Yeah, with unification, there definitely needs to be changes to make unification feel better. And that's one of the big changes that I really want them to do. Because I guess, like, I'll just insert it here before we actually get into some of the spoilers. I ran a little Facebook poll. It's still going on. As of the recording, technically it says voting ends in like 2 days, but whenever. I did get some initial little bits of data. This is not going to be indicative of the final data when the poll actually closes, as according to Facebook. But right now, I just asked a simple question. Are you happy with the current state of Digimon as of the 2020 environment? 42% of people said yes, they are happy. 10% of people said no, they're not happy. 45% says they're literally going to wait and see to see if things fix post-nationals. And the last bit basically says they're either new and they don't know, or they're just flat out quitting. That makes a total of 3%. So the vast majority of players, based on this poll, are either, it's very polarizing, either unhappy with the game or are happy with the game. And more people are leaning towards the unhappy aspect because they want things to be fixed. They like the game, but they want it to be better. And right now, Bandai is not proving that they can deliver on that promise. And boy, do I know all about broken promises. Bandai is a company that is nothing but broken promises, and it just always makes me sad. I watched it's an older video, but I watched a video where it's like, Bandai doesn't know how to sell things. They do know how to sell, like, that video holds a lot of good, like, truths to it on how Bandai generally mismanages every IP that they have. And they tend to make whatever they touch really bad after a really good start. And it's always very painful for us Digimon fans because they've always treated us really poorly, like incredibly poorly. So I just want them to be better. But they haven't given me the confidence to it. But going into one of probably the best comment of this post, I'll probably end up doing a whole video once this post, like once the polls are closed or whatever. But going over the best comment from this post as far as why a player is not super content with where the meta is, and this will transition into like the meta portion, because we'll just put spoilers later. But personally, they're not really all that happy. They love the game and they want to see it succeed, but people right now are arguing that the meta is diverse. And the counter argument for that is it actually isn't diverse as people think. Yes, we have about 7-ish playable decks in the game currently, but the vast majority of those decks are pick your flavor of blue or purple. And then on top of that, it's pick your flavor of OTK. So, like, to kind of, like, elaborate more on the comment itself, I'm not going to, like, label who said the comment. I'd probably do that more in my specific video if I was going to be covering it. But essentially, yes, the meta does have 7 decks, but each of the decks are insanely volatile, where you either have a rookie, push out of raising, and pop a whole bunch of trainings, boosts, and scrambles after your first 3 turns to be able to OTK the opponent. It's either that or the flip side, where it's a hybrid-based deck that just has some sort of infinite loop to gain and reuse the same resources it has just used perpetually, making for very uninteractive gameplay because the Digimon dies, it resets the tamer, you can't do anything about the tamer, and then they reuse the tamer to play the Digimon that then resets the tamer. There's at least 3 different hybrid-based decks that all do that, on top of the 3 current OTK decks, and outside of that, the diversity is actually pretty non-existent. So even the lower powered, the lower powered decks that fit into this category are still insane. The only one that really doesn't fit into this category is Imperial, and that's just because you play a Davis and Ken, and then it gives you 10 times the amount of value any tamer reasonably should over the course of the entire game. And then on top of that, we also find that decks are printing memory, ignoring the resource system of the game, which is really absurd. And the resource system of the game being memory was one of the most unique and interesting aspects of the game. So, even to, it's so bad to the point where even if you're choked at 1, decks can print 5 to 7 memory to ignore the fact that they were even put to 1 in the first place. Which, again, just goes to all eliminating the amount of counterplay that we have. So that was all taken hyperbole and ad-libbed from the post itself. And right now, that comment itself has one of the highest amount of likes on the post. So that's kind of the shared sentiment with a lot of players, is what it seems like, where we just want to like the game, but Bandai is making it very hard to like when the meta is as uninteractive as possible. And we play these types of games to have these interactions. So, I guess with that, we could probably jump to the meta portion, because this all relates and pertains to where the meta currently is in Special Booster 2.0. So I'm going to pull up a quick little chart here for everyone to kind of see. And I guess if you want, Jay Stewart, you could start off by saying where this meta currently is.
Yeah, so right now there's 3 major decks. It's the Excel file you shared with me, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So throughout the entire meta spread of 2.0, there is, if you're looking at numbers or even percentages, there is 3 particular ones that stand out the most. That is Mirage, that is Magnamon X, and Purple Hybrid. And almost in a darn way, Purple Hybrid and Mirage almost do the exact same thing in a weird nutshell, to a certain degree of just abusing memory, I guess you could say, and doing these constant checks, you can say, as well. The Magnamon X, it kind of varies a little bit about what variant it could be. It could be just the blue armor variant, but it could also be the Imperial Dramon armor based variant too, that we have been seeing people using now lately too, which is abusing the best tamer that is out there, the Davis and Ken. I mean, this, no matter how you look at it, because if you're looking at it through the Imperial armor way, it's again memory abuse and everything that they're trying to do. The blue armor variant, it's where it's just like the pure Vmon line and all the Vmon armors. It's a little bit more fair to a certain extent. But
well, it's fair because it's paying for its stuff. It's not fair because you have no way to actually interact with Magnamon X in a reasonable way, which is why a lot of Imperial decks have shifted towards using Magnamon X as a top end, because it literally fits in archetype because Imperial cares about the free trait, and the new Magnamon X has this magical line of text that says it's also counted as free. But because literally a security, doesn't matter if it's yours or the opponent's, needs to be checked in order for him to gain full immunity for a turn, is part of the problem, because not a lot of decks actually have counterplay that can be able to beat it out. Which is why Numemon was so prevalent, was because it actually had one of the only answers to be able to beat out Magnamon X. And I'm not saying because Numemon is gone, Magnamon X is now reigning supreme. There's lots of different other reasons, but it's it's sharing this whole theme on making the game as uninteractive as possible, because if you don't answer the Magnamon X, you strictly will lose to Magnamon X. And now that there's more level 7 Ace Digimon, it's even harder to even try to answer it, because if you try to attack over it or do something, now they just ace, and yes, they lost the Magnamon X, but their Digimon still has the supposed immunities that Magnamon X would have provided, and the DP boost, and now they also gain extra abilities to try to out your Digimon, and once that Digimon is outed, it's going to be a little bit harder and slower to rebuild, so they could still use that level 7 to then punch you in the face and win the game pretty swiftly after.
Yeah, and then even the whole using the Imperial Dramon, the fact that it's even using the best level 5 partition and everything, so even if you somehow do out it, you could partition, get 2 more bodies back on your field, DNA, and do that all over again.
I mean, but those style of Magnamon X decks, I in this data I actually lumped with Imperial because it's still using the Imperial core and shell, and like it's a testament to how good that shell actually is just to go into any generic top end. I didn't separate like Mirage from Mirage Galaxy, which I think like maybe I need to like reevaluate how I'm lumping the decks together. Like, should I lump them based on core and engine, or should I lump them based on top end? Because lumping them based on top end, probably Magnamon would have a better showing in this data spread, and Imperial would have a worse showing. But then again, like also Mirage having the two different engines it plays with, which is its mono blue like dog and fish engine versus the Galaxy engine. So maybe I do have to reevaluate how I do this data probably going forward. But one of the other decks outside of Magnamon X that's standing out is obviously, as I just mentioned, Mirage. Mirage is just one of the best decks and has been one of the best decks for upmost of a year and a half almost. It's really standing the test of time because as the game gets more and more powerful, it really goes to show how strong like Mirage as a card is. Because obviously, as I mentioned, the Galaxy engine is abusing him as just a good generic blue top end. And he has obviously his own deck that is now subsidizing some of the fish stuff because, you know, he's caring more about blue as a color rather than his own native, like, it needs to be Gao named cards. Because he's just trying to be in like a really dumb OTK deck where I'm just going to get up into my Mirage. I'm going to lock you out of the game because if you're going to try drawing or doing anything to add more cards into your hand to try to out whatever I'm going to be playing, I'm going to tax you for that. And the bigger the hand size, the harder the tax. So he just creates this like very uninteresting play pattern where once he's on the field, he again, just like Magnamon, needs very specific answers. Otherwise, you just lose to the card. Because what these blue decks are doing is they're just multi-attacking a couple of times in a single turn. And Mirage has more proactive ways to close out games than Magnamon. But Magnamon still has those tools. It's just a little harder to get to them. But you can't deal with Magnamon versus you have more ways to deal with Mirage. But it's still very difficult. And that's kind of the sentiment between the memory generation, the consistency, and just how fast it's able to move, set up, and OTK in a single turn is absolutely ridiculous, which is why he's like still standing the test of time and being one of the best decks in the entire game.
But it's also just the fact that Mirage is also just like the most stupidest basic like splashable blue top, and because like you were saying, you know, like players are using it in the Galactic deck instead of, you know, their own Galactic cards. It's like the Galactic cards are fair, so to say, but it's the fact that you gave Mirage that all turns floodgate effect is what's making him really even more stupid.
Yeah, and like that's why the Galaxy engine I think is only going to get better over time because again, as things get faster and it's easier to use these types of cards and have higher levels of consistency now thanks to the gem boosts. Now you have better ways to be able to use these tools to be able to find what you need to perform your said combos. So that just goes to show like how a newer style card can be used in these older decks to make these older decks even more abusable than what they already were. So it's just making the good decks better. And yes, it does help the bad decks from being better, but again, the power gap between them is already just that immense. And the subs, like the secondary mega that Mirage is using, also is another blue level 6 floodgate. And as we're seeing, level 6 Digimon sometimes are very hard to deal with if you don't have very specific answers. So even though Hexablow is a little harder for the deck to use and doesn't synergize as much, the fact that it is just another floodgate for the deck to use, it does have some tamer hate, and because it's blue, it's still on color with the rest of the cards, it makes it a very easy card for it to use in either Galaxy Engine or its own. And like reading into the future, Mirage, like the Galaxy Engine's not going to go away, and even if Mirage does, then they're just going to adapt the X antibody and use what's its face, Gallant X in EX8, because that's coming up. That's our next set after 2.0 is EX8, and he's there, and he's two colors in both the colors that the Galaxy deck is looking at. But for right now, for Nationals, whether it's the Galaxy version or just pure Mirage, the fact that it's just very hard to deal with level 6 floodgates is what's making Mirage absolutely insane right now.
I would almost even argue it's the fact that there's three different variants that you could come across also makes it really hard to play against as well. Because if you are more familiar with the Mirage, like actual line, then you know it's like, okay, keep my hand below 7 is how I could try to hopefully stop this deck from doing what it wants to try to do. But then you could come across the Galaxy one where it's like, I don't care. I'm going to force you to like play the Galmon. I'm going to make you draw all these cards and interact on your turn when it should be your turn and everything. And even like using the whole fish engine, like I'm not familiar with that one, but I can assume it's doing some ridiculous stuff already.
Well, it's more of the aquatic cards because you have the Hankunmons. So the main Hankun is basically a baby version of the limited Mach Gaugamon. So it's allowing you to have very easy access at multi-attacking, all for putting a blue Digimon underneath you, which you then can, like, you could use in some very interesting combos to be able to get even more attacks that realistically shouldn't have been possible to begin with. So, and that card also solves a lot of the deck's problems as well, because if you didn't have jamming in that stack, you just split out a level 3, evolve into a level 4 that would have the inheritable jamming, eat the level 4, get multi-attack, and have jamming now that and have access at jamming now. So like there's a lot of like really intricate combo plays that Hankun introduces into the deck. And then you also have the newest Hankun, which came out with 2.0 because it's a BT19 card, where it's acting like the BT13 Mach, where it stops being redirected. So you literally can't block or defend against the card. And yes, you lose out on the multi-attack, but it's safer than the BT13 Mach because you don't have to swing with it as a level 5. So it makes it harder to ace you in response. And the last card to like the fish engine, outside of literally using Midoki Beta, Otama, and Siako as really good level 3 floodgates, is the technically you would also consider playing Zudo Ace. It's not really an aquatic card, but that card was already still being played. And they have a new level 4. I'm trying to find it in my deck because I always forget its name. Uh, it's the Jiquebon. So sorry if I butchered that. It's basically the level 4 to the Hankun line, where it, like, the BT19 one is absolutely insane because the top half of the card is doing exactly what the EX4 Gao is doing. So bouncing a rookie so you could out the opponent's floodgates. And then the bottom half is doing the exact same as BT16 Gao, which is jamming. So there's literally no reason not to use the card because it's just a combination of the best abilities from cards you're already playing. And then the Bukamon egg just makes the deck um, more memory efficient, which it really didn't need because now if you're using the good Honkun and you're able to split out a body, that Honkun effectively evoed for 2, which you could further reduce based on trainings and scrambles and whatnot. So yeah, it's just all kinds of nuts.
Yeah. And then the third deck, I mean, I think what makes the third deck, the purple hybrid, the best one is because not only is it playing, like, swinging and playing out the tamers similar to how the ancient Greymon and ancient Garurumon was kind of doing, it also has a second win condition that literally has no interaction whatsoever unless you're playing that exact same deck. Because what it's doing is using the not Duskmon, it's
Velgar,
Volgamon,
Velgarmon.
Velgamon. Yeah, it's like the fact that it's able to go, oh, based on the number of colors you have on your field, we each mill the top cards of our deck. And Purple Hybrid is using a lot of Beelzemon's cards. It's using the Deathslinger, it's using the Rivals Barrage as example of some cards that it could abuse to generate memory. It's also putting Tamers in its trash, so when it does, like if it doesn't die from security check, it goes, oh, by the way, end of attack, I'm going to blow itself up to delete one of your Digimon. Oh, Duskmon's inheritable. I get to play out Matashita that I just milled for free, and then Matt's effect, I get to add Duskmon and set up for next turn and do it all over again. Because the moment you see one of those, you just told me what that darn thing's name was.
Velgarmon.
Belgramon, thank you. Like, the moment you see one in your trash, that's all you need. And you could just go ham with it. And the fact that you're changing your opponent's card colors, so if they don't have the black text box that say, oh, Digivolve on top of name or specific traits, you just kind of lock them out from evoing.
Yeah, and the fact that that's literally like 4 cards out of the whole deck means that you have a lot of deck space to do whatever the heck you want. So people are playing purple hybrids in a whole bunch of different decks. One of the two most popular variants is obviously the Merva variant because you already are generating lots of resources for free or basically nothing. So it's very easy to fill up your trash. So they're just like, cool, we're just going to abuse Jack Raid, like Blue abused Hammer Spark, which keep in mind Hammer Spark is now limited to 1, and Jack Raid could potentially produce more than 1 memory that you could use multiple times repeatedly in a single turn, on top of like the memory boosts that you sometimes are already playing, to be able to just have these like explosive memory turns where you're just going to be like, yeah, I'm going to drop this Mervamon. This Mervamon's going to spawn 2 extra bodies. These 2 bodies are going to be able to attack because, of course, they can with retaliation. So not only am I chipping at your security pretty safely with the Velgarmon, but now you also have this alternative way to be able to close out the games out of nowhere, utilizing Mervamon as well. And if they're not playing Mervamon, then they're going to be playing basically this yellow top end, because you could have transition points into yellow because you'd be running some of the purple yellow hybrids, and you could just evo pretty quickly and efficiently up into a level 6 and use those level 6s similarly to Mirage to try to lock the opponent out of playing the game, either by setting up an ace that acts as a floodgate or by setting up Venus that is actually a floodgate. And the only one that's like proactively trying to help win the game faster, usually that people play, is Sendril, just because she could multi-attack, because she doesn't require, like, because of how overclock works. So yeah, the deck is just all kinds of nutty, and the fact that it has so many variants, and the fact that you just can't interact with any of it because, as kind of mentioned before in some of the qualms that people are having, Bandai just has actively reduced the amount of interaction that we have. So based on the top 3 decks, the deck you have the most interaction with is Mirage, because Mirage does have weaknesses to aces, and he does have weaknesses to big hard removal cards. Those are literally his weaknesses. But if Mirage is smart and they know how to play against the deck, they could try to mitigate that, where I'm not just going to Digivolve up into a Mirage the second I can. Most of the time, they'll just continue to sit there, wait, and draw cards until they have an OTK setup, and then they just move out in OTK. So it's not like you could really interact with Mirage. And if they do sit on a Mirage, usually they have a backup plan in the waits, and that's where scrambles come in to help fix that issue. But if we look at Magnamon, again, you get up into Magnamon, if you're able to constantly punch security, you literally can't do anything about Magnamon. You cannot touch him outside of being bigger than him or trying to have a lingering effect that makes him significantly worse that he sometimes can also play out of. So, yeah. And then, as I kind of already said with hybrids, they usually kill themselves, reset the tamer, grab back whatever card that they already used to go up into their hybrid to begin with, and you just can't deal with tamers most of the time. So you could start to see this like pattern of just uninteractable levels, like uninteractable variants on how little you could handle these decks. And the rest of the meta is either trying to double down into that same type of strategies, or those same type of strategies, or just have a way to try to bypass them. So that's where the rest of the meta kind of started to develop, where Ancient Greymon is basically just another big dumb red OTK deck. I'm going to go up into Ancient Grey, punch, then he dies if I didn't kill you, and set up a tamer so that way I could go up into a hybrid and kill you the next turn. You have Imperial, which again is kind of like the exception, but they're just trying to go up into a big level 5 or level 6 that you just cannot interact with. And if you can, usually they would have an out to be able to play around the fact that you could try to do something against them. Then you have Fenrir Lugamon. This is lower on the list, but Fenrir Lugamon, and again, another big dumb OTK deck. And Leviamon and Lord Knight X, which are basically the same deck, which again is another big dumb pseudo OTK deck, where they're just trying to punch and hit hard, and they're like the more reactive OTK decks because they set up little traps for the opponent to try to fall into. And I think like that's why they're lower, is because if you could play around their traps and make it so they don't work, then the deck doesn't function as well as it should. Because they're not true OTK decks, but they do abuse the memory to be able to have like absolutely insane reactive plays. And then like the last deck that's even worth mentioning is probably 3 Great Angels, and I guess maybe 7 Great Demon Lords. You could see like percentage wise 7 Great Demon Lords has not been doing that great this format, but 7 Great Demon Lords and 3 Great Angels kind of fall in the same camp, where I'm just going to set up a really big defensive field to where it's going to make your life that much harder to deal with. And again, you really can't interact with them because 3 Great Angels has Dominimon, which gives protection from everything. For the most part, it does have weaknesses, but it could play around some of those weaknesses if it really wanted to. And then you have 7 Great Demon Lords, which is another big dumb control deck where it's like, I'm going to hard play my big body and out your card, and then my card just dies. And then I get resources for it dying. And eventually, once I have enough resources under my egg, I just automatically win the game. So you can kind of see like this pattern on how things are just, you just can't deal with anything. Like you honestly can't. Even some of like the lesser decks, as we see on like the 16 decks that were able to top this format so far. Rapidmon, again, trying to be a deck that is more of a control style deck, but you have the level 5 that gives it the protections, which sometimes is all it really needs in order to get set up to control you out of the game. Then you have Digi D-Brigades, which again, if you can't get rid of their protections and out their Digimon multiple times, which is very difficult, then you just can't do anything about them. And Black is really good at being anti-meta because Digivolve is actually really good in this meta, but Black decks don't really have the best resource generation, so they're moving slower than most other decks, which is why, like, what's its face? Dexter Goromon kind of started falling out, is because it's just not fast enough. It literally is not fast enough, and the format only got faster because of the scrambles. And then the only other deck that like is on here that's really worth mentioning outside of like Phoenixmon. Phoenixmon's just being another hyper aggro deck trying to OTK, and if it doesn't like use its whole like wombo combo, it has a ton of on deletes that try to punish the opponent, which is where blue kicks in and being like insane against it because bouncing doesn't trigger on deletes. And Galactimon is like literally the only other deck because Galactimon, one, is another big uninteractable body, but two, has Tamer Hate and is one of the better Tamer Hate cards with the Destromon. And it actually can move fast enough, which is why it kind of replaced the Dorugoromon because of how Digicrossing from the trash is kind of stupid. So, yeah, there's that. The only other deck on this list is literally Shine Greymon, and again, it could just be another big uninteractable OTK deck, and that's it. It's like you either can't out the body because it just bounces the Tamers, or they're playing it like the OTK deck, and then they just set up their OTK. Like, that's literally what this meta has developed into, is either you can't interact with me because Tamers, or some other force, or I OTK you. And there's just a tiny sprinkle of control here and there. And can you honestly say that's fun?
Yeah,
Like,
I think another
really?
thing too is
Oh, go ahead.
well, I was gonna say, because the other thing too is a lot of these decks, like, they're able to, like, I mean, yeah, it's a lot of these decks are able to abuse something in some type of way. Like, take the Shine Greymon, for example. Using the Marcus at, when attacking, you can Digivolve for free, and say you Digivolve into the Rise Greymon, oh, Marcus is deleted from the security battle. Oh, Rise Greymon's able to just free recover that, so if your opponent tries to attack you, you just have the Marcus set up for next turn at that point.
Yeah,
And
like,
even like using the Viamon and even the where are you? The Lord Naimon X and everything. Like, Lord Naimon especially is able to generate so much memory, not as much as how Purple Hybrid can, but it's like just generating so much memory. And the Viamon is like, oh, at any moment you play something out by an effect, I could trigger X to respond to you and just get out a free level 6. I mean, it does take some setup, don't get me wrong on that, but it isn't that hard for the deck to do. Because we're even seeing Lord Naimon using Levias package at this point, almost.
yeah, like Lord
Or,
Lightmon
like,
and
the
Leviamon are very
Lord
much
Knight
married.
are, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they're
that's,
very much
sorry,
married
that's
at the hip, yeah.
And then, you know, Red Hybrid, Purple Hybrid, and Ancient Garurumon, like, those decks are using, like, this thing to just play out a bunch of Tamers for free when some, like, if they get deleted. So, generating free stuff, you know, you got 3 Great Angels. Like, yes, it does have that broken protection, but I'm pretty confident, and it's safe to assume that they are still using that Patamon, because why would you not use Patamon when everything is vaccine trait? Or vaccine type?
For which deck?
The 3 Great Angels.
Yeah, they're 100% using Patamon. Because, like you said, free evolution that also can net you memory is, like, absolutely ridiculous. And they have the QPmon to be able to set that up more consistently. Not as consistently as TK, the Tamer, that they lost. But the fact that they still have the potential to set it up is already really good. And technically that deck got better because of the yellow scramble too. So like the scrambles are kind of just absolutely nuts. Like, honestly, looking at a lot of these decks, the majority of them scrambles can be abused in. Like, I know for a fact that Purple Hybrids doesn't really have the greatest scramble use, but Mirage definitely has some good scramble usage. Magnamon has good scramble usage. Imperial has good scramble usage, sort of. The two color aspect on splitting your colors between blue and green kind of makes it a little bit rough, but you can use scrambles in it. Lord Nightmon and by extension Leviamon definitely can use scrambles. Because the dog package just goes, and Purple also has incidentally an awkwardly high amount of rush. So like if you use like the Cerberus, you could give your own Digimon that you played off of the scramble rush, and I think that's kind of nuts. Then you have Fen, who also can abuse scrambles because DNA resets the Digimon, so the Digimon then could attack. And like scrambles are basically like I was testing them out, and scrambles are basically the new Hammer Sparks. Like they are just as good as Hammer Spark most of the time, which I think is like kind of crazy.
Yeah, because like the fact I think what definitely makes the scrambles like just really absurd. Like, granted, they are not. Well, actually, no. I think they because what do? They can reduce the evo cost by 4. I think
It's
by playing it
three.
for
It's pay
by
two,
3 for a
reduce
cost of 2.
three. Yeah, for
So you're
digivolving into the same color.
yeah. So theoretically, for one less memory, you get to reduce your evo cost like immediately compared to something like how the blue training card is. Like, I'm not saying that scrambles are better than the blue training because I would say those two could be in their own right aspect on par with each other. But it's like the fact that you get to immediately reduce your evo costs is what definitely helps makes them really hard to deal with. And it's even kind of a callback to something earlier we had on the podcast where there's not really a lot of options right now to answer option cards. Like, the
No,
best we have is Lucamon, but there's not a like Lucamon, as you can see in this metadata, has not been able to get represented at all. Like, I've tried playing Lucamon at my locals. I've done everything I could to try to make my deck memory efficient, recover, and everything. But like when I was playing Lucamon against a purple hybrid, they would go, okay, I'm going to attempt to delete this, using the Vulgarmon's effect. Okay, I will use my one-time protection. Okay, that's great. Here's Deathslinger. So now I get to just kill your guy. And just leaves me with nothing to now have to take longer to reset everything up because my one-time protection, and they, like, you have the purple hybrid that has so many different ways to delete Digimon. It's like absurd.
yeah, well, Lucamon also is just too slow and very easy to play around because the best way to play around Lucamon, spoiler, is to sacrifice your own bodies, which it sounds counterintuitive, but if you give Lucamon the recovery, usually that's the mistake. But yeah, Lusamon's just his cards cost too much. He's giving too much memory, giving the opponent plenty of opportunity to be able to counter him and out what he's doing. Purple Hybrids just so happens to, because they have very cheap and hyper effective removal, because like you said, they are abusing the Deathslingers and the Rivals and cards that have abilities that trigger when they're milled to be able to gain free resources out of nowhere. Yes, it's RNG based, but the fact that it's still free resources out of nowhere is like absolutely ridiculous. They want to play that double as removal in their hand. So it's never a dead card. But yeah, like it's just super rough for where a lot of decks are versus where the current way the meta has developed. And unfortunately, based on the spoilers that we have and the Japanese metadata, things are actually only going to get worse, not better, unless something is done, which is why I really hope after Nationals, Bandai comes out with a ban and restriction list because we're in very desperate need. But the only problem is kind of like going back to that post, people were saying like, oh, the BT, I'll just say BT 17 ban and restriction list where Numemon got hit, that didn't do enough. And we knew it didn't do enough. And that's partially why we're still in the problem we are today, is because I honestly don't think whatever Bandai is going to ban and restrict is going to be enough to actually fix the game. That's like my big fear, because we did a whole episode like 2-3 weeks ago, like almost a month ago, on cards that we know, not even think, know based on past trends and like based on past ban history trends. These are cards that are proven to be hyper problematic that are still in the game. And that list was bare minimum 14 cards. So like we need a very extensive ban and restriction list in order to bring the game back to a reasonable state. And I don't know if Bandai actually has it in them to do it. I mean, granted, the last ban and restriction list was pretty sizable. It was like 9 or 10 cards, something like that. So like they're getting there, but the fact that we have so many issues that need to be fixed makes it very disheartening to believe that it's actually going to get fixed. As much as we all want and are screaming for it. Some problems are, yes, more obvious than others, which is why, like, going into Nationals, the decks that I'm prepared for the most are those top 3 decks. Purple Hybrids, Mirage, Magnamon. Those are the decks that I would be teching my deck in, like teching my deck to play against the most. Because right now, those are the 3 best decks currently as of the metadata that we have available to us. There's no reason not to play them. And if you're already playing against those 3 decks, because of the different playstyles that they hold, you're already counter-teching for other decks as well. So like if I'm counter-teching for Purple Hybrids, the same counter-techs work for Ancient Greymon. I don't need to change anything to counter-tech it. If you're counter-teching for Magnamon, I don't need to counter-tech for 3 Great Angels. Because, again, big invincible wall. If I can't scale over it, just go around it. And certain decks would be able to go around it and tech for that. And if you're teching for Mirage, then you're also kind of teching for Lord Nightmon. Because, quick, easy, efficient memory generation and fast evolutions into level 6s that don't have native protections, cool. I'll just run removal or run floodgates to try to stop and slow them down before they could even get going. Like, you can kind of see there's this homogenization with the different strategies and how these decks are all playing into the same goals. Which is, in particularly, not fun or interesting, and why a lot of people are finding more animosity as the format progresses, and why we currently got to this state that we're in. But that's my 2 cents as a person going to Nationals, is like, what am I actually prepping for, and what am I planning on playing against? Like, I do think all 16 of the decks that we've mentioned are somewhat meta viable. Obviously, the data is reflecting some are more viable than others, and those are the ones that you're going to generally want to try to be prepared for, because if these are the decks that are going to be winning, or have won, and these are the percentages of their representation, people generally like to look at that type of data and be like, what was the winning deck? I want to play the winning deck. So that's why I think, like, even though 7 Great Demon Lords isn't like a top, like, it's not in the top 8, it's still going to have some decent representation, just because it could be teched to try to counter some of the other decks that they might hope to see based on this type of data. And it also has actually won an event. So there's also that. But yeah, so that's kind of just the meta in a nutshell on where it currently is, and I'm not going to speak to exactly how EX8 is going to influence our meta environment, because we could get a ban and restriction list by then, and we're also playing with EX8 technically before Japan did, because Japan had like BT19 cards before, like BT19 completely done before EX8, so we're playing with it slightly off-kiltered, so we can't use all of the Gallantmon cards to the same level of efficiency that they can, because they were playing with the BT19 Gallantmon stuff as well. So it'll be interesting to see how that meta shapes and develops, but as far as Nationals go, that's kind of where my mindset is on how we got to this current state, and what am I expected to play against, and kind of why things have developed the way they have. Well, not exactly the why part. we partially covered that. Some of the why is in development of how these cards were made, but we're not speaking on that part. So I guess we could probably just get into some spoilers to kind of start to round things out and close it up. Round things and close things out.
Yeah, that's fine with me.
Yeah, so like I kind of said, I think based on where we were, we already knew a lot of the promos, but we did get the full like better image quality versions of them. And I think the DNAs for the perspective natures are kind of interesting. So that's Magnadramon, Pokemon, and Boltmon. They're all kind of doing something very similar, considering they're just working with their, native family. So nothing too interesting there. I don't necessarily think those cards are going to be hyper meta because those decks that they're already being played in are not meta at all. Like, we could pretend that they are, but Japanese data already is kind of showing that they're not. They're like cute cards and cute decks, but they're not meta decks. So I guess we could go into one of the more meta cards, starting with Heavy Metal Ace, because that card looks really good.
Yeah, I think this is definitely a card that the deck needed for sure.
Yeah, so... Oh, go ahead.
It's able to trash your hand down to the 4, which is the magic deck number the deck wants you to be able to do. And then the fact that it has, what is this, all Digimon with Dark Dragon and Evil Dragon traits gain Rush and Blocker. I mean, and plus also get 2000 DP. This could even intentionally work with the Scramble cards as well. So you don't have to just run that Rush Guilmon from EX3. I think that's the set it's from. Or EX4.
I
One
think
of
it's
those
EX.
two.
Yeah, I think it's EX4.
But yeah, so it's like now it just kind of opens you up to even have other possibilities now too.
That and the fact that it's an ace means it has a 7 play cost, which means the old heavy metal could summon the new heavy metal is also kind of nutty. Like it's just a really really good card. And the fact that it's also an ace means you could revive the level 5 to try to ace bait them into the level 6. So it just, because of just how heavy metal kind of just works, this card does so much for that deck. I don't necessarily think it's going to immediately turn the deck into like a tier 1 deck, but it definitely turns something that was borderline unplayable into something that actually could be a very solid rogue contender. Then we did get those are cleaned up images of Bow and Savior, I believe.
Yes.
So just more broken Jesmon cards. Bow is just another efficiency card. It's working with the idea where you get to play a Sistermon and then you can digivolve into a you could digivolve for less. So nothing we haven't really seen before. And then the Savior is giving your Digimon Alliance, which is weird because the deck already has lots of ways to like increase DP. But I guess it's just for the security tech for the most part, and the fact that your Sistermons, if they're not blockers, they're really not doing anything, especially the turn you play them out because you have no way of giving them rush. So Alliance is kind of just whatever. But it's more low-level removal, which is good to stop floodgates, and it also just allows you to, get a free evolution? Yeah, it's a free evolution into Jesmon, which is kind of nutty.
I will say with these two cards, like, with the Belmont, it's at least not playing the Sistermon for free. There's going to still be some kind of cost, whether it's Blanc or Seal, because it's only reducing the play cost by 2. But I guess no, that, yeah.
Yeah, so it's
the other thing.
Yeah,
but
you're supposed to use this to
is,
combo. Yeah, you're supposed to use this to combo with either the memory gain one, Like, it's obviously going to be a Noir card that you're going to want to play off of this, because Noir either lets you Digivolve and reduce and gain 1 memory for Digivolving, um, or you're going to be playing the one that just gives you a flat out memory. Or not Noir, CL, my bad. Yeah, so you're going to want to use that with the CLs, and then because of their delay option, you could Evo for cheaper. So it's just like, cool, I'm going to play the Sistermon for cheap, use the Sistermon's ability to Evo for cheap, gain the memory back, and then like kind of just combo off. That's kind of how I'm reading into the card based on how Jessamon plays.
Yeah. And the other thing I'm thinking of too with the Savior Huckmon, the fact that you have to suspend your other Digimon to Evo into it for free. Now, I'm pretty sure there's a way to summon multiple Sistermons before you go into the Savior Huckmon. But if there's not,
Well, the
then
Bauhuck reduces it, so you play the Sistermon to Digivolve the Bow into the Savior, then the Savior suspends the Sistermon to Digivolve into the Jess for free. That's kind of the line that they're trying to go with.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to say though is with the inheritable, the Alliance, you can't at least use the suspended one. So it means you have to have another way to get another one out, which I think at that point your Jesmon is able to.
Yeah, Jesmon
Potentially,
usually plays out a Sistermon.
Yeah.
But,
To me, it just looks like there's some kind of effort that was made to not make these ones as broken, I guess. But
I mean,
I'm pretty sure with
good.
old ones are, yeah.
They're still really insanely good. Like, Jesmon has some consistency issues because of the fact that he needs to run Sistermons. And because he needs to run Sistermons, that makes it harder to run specific options. And he got really as of right now, no new options to really help facilitate him. I guess, like, the Gem Boost is probably the best option that he got, because you could use it to grab the Genkus, because some of the Genkus are black, but can Evo off of red. But even then, that's still, like, just okay. It's not, like, insane. So it's really going to be, like, what other new support cards does that deck get to see if it actually has better legs than it's ever had to be able to make itself consistent enough to be a meta contender. Because some of those cards on its top end are, like, actually, like, they're kind of nuts, as we kind of already spoiled earlier. And then we got more Imperial, like Virus Imperial stuff. So, yeah, Virus Imperial, we knew was going to be a thing a year ago when they first showed off Liberators. That was like the big splash art. So now we're finally getting more of his cards. A lot of these kind of seem kind of boring. So Vmon is what? Just a Evo reduction card? Like your stereotypical Evo reduction? Just to help climb into a level 4 to start your crisscross DNA. And then the Wormmon is it's an on play. I'm just trying to remember what some of these cards do. It's a debuff on the opponent to try to make your cards more efficient. So like they're both efficiency tools in different ways. The Vmon is trying to make it so your cards digivolve for less, and the Wormmon is giving the opponent's Digimon a debuff, so that way when you go up into your higher stages and delete the opponent's Digimon, then you gain extra benefit. But the real big card, if you want to talk about that, is the fighter mode, which is actually kind of nuts. Like, it's really insane how easy to use this card is, and the crazy thing is, this card also could be used in a generic way. So
yeah, because it already has like a radiant piercing, so fairly decent for the most part, especially since a lot of the cards that, well, if you consider the ones from EX3 and even like this new one, the new stuff that they are doing, it looks like the Vmons are also doing DP boosts as well. So you're gonna probably get a pretty big stack. But it has the when digivolving, your opponent can't play Digimon or Tamers by effects until the end of their turn. That's a floodgate effect if I've ever seen one, and it's pretty darn good.
And the crazy thing is, the crazy thing is it doesn't need anything to trigger that effect. You just get it for using the card. But as you were about to read, which I'll let you continue, it does have an ability for when you use it in quotation marks, properly with Imperial Dramon Dragon Mode.
Yeah, because then if Imperial Dragon Mode was in the Digivolution cards, you could trash your opponent's top security card. I mean, I'm not sure how good that is. I think it depends on the matchup, because there is some security cards that can trigger when they're trashed. But trashing security is definitely a lot better a lot of the times versus swinging into security or checking your opponent's security.
Yeah.
Also has an alt turns, so once per turn, when an opponent's security card is removed, delete one of their Digimon with as much DP as this Digimon. That's pretty darn good too.
Yeah, it's just your basic removal ability. So if they do have multiple Digimon out, you could raid piercing into one and then check the opponent's security, and then when it's removed, then you get to pop one of their other Digimon. It's good board control, and like that's really all there is to it. The fact that it's all turns is also kind of nutty, because that means you could use this effect potentially aggressively or defensively. Really just depends on the matchup on how you could apply and use this card. But the fact that it does have like a really good generic floodgate effect that is completely agnostic of using dragon mode, and you just get more benefit for using dragon mode, is kind of nutty. That's what a lot of people are looking at. Then we do have I think I skipped over some of the Leomon stuff, because we got Liamon and Diatrimon. They're literally nothing burgers. Liamon is not even, it doesn't even have the magical text where it's counted as a Leomon, or like having Leomon in name. So it has anti-synergy with the rest of the Leomon stuff, but it's trying to play with its Excel stuff. But very basic effects of just minus 3k on play when Digivolve and Barrier Inheritable, so literally nothing burger. And Diatrimon is just suspending a Digimon and piercing, so literally just nothing. And the same nothingness is kind of extended to the ghost stuff. So we got Ghostmon, which is, shocker, a searcher for liberators and ghosts. With the inheritable of on delete gain a memory, which we've seen a couple of times. So that's alluding to the deck wanting to delete itself in a way. So that way it could gain a whole bunch of benefits. But we'll see what the rest of that line is looking like to see how good that inheritable actually is. And the egg, Demi-Meramon, is just your stereotypical on-delete retriever for other ghost traded cards. So it grabs you back the cards that you already used. And Bakemon is just another very hyper-generic card. Tamer Setter, it's the new style, not the old style, with that same inheritable of just gaining a memory on delete. Then next would be the Huckmon.
Well, technically, we already did cover Hugmon with the Dorumon and the Lugumon.
Oh yeah, we did. So it
It's
would
just
be
a better,
yeah, it would be
clearer
the
version.
Awakened. Yeah, it would be Awakened next. CL Awaken, which we're not getting a Noir, and this is Japan's first instance of, our woes on not getting Noir. So that's pretty big for them. But we have to keep in mind that technically CL is Noir and Noir is CL. Based on how the way the card games worked. Thank you, censorship. But anyway, CL Awakened, these new Awakened ones are kind of nutty too.
Mm-hmm.
So the new wave of Awaken, which I'm sure the new Blanc Awaken is going to be in the set, they have an ability that triggers from the trash, which allows you to Digivolve into it. So when any of your Digimon are played, one of your Sistermon CLs can... Yeah, so basically from the trash, you could just Digivolve into the Awakened, which is insane because we do have the CL that can help put... Or not the CL, the Blanc that could discard a card, putting the Awakened in the trash to then use when we play out the proper Sistermon. Then... They also have a lot of other abilities where during the end of all turns, you basically get a free recovery because you, instead of de-digivolving this, it just goes into the security instead of the trash. which again is kind of nutty, gives Jespawn way more survivability, because then when the opponent attacks, the awakened form goes into the trash, ready to be reused because of its trash ability. So, yeah, just all kinds of nuts. And it has another very basic on play and when digivolving effect, so higher levels of usability compared to the other awakens, where it's just stunning the opponent's Digimon. So, all kinds of good stuff here. Crabmon's pretty basic. Not even really worth mentioning. Inheritable just lets you draw a card if you have less than 7. Very stereotypical blue thing we've seen a million times before. And its on plane when digivolving is a little bit more interesting on Crabmon X Antibody, because it just gives us battle protection. So, hooray, more protection. That's exactly what we needed. If you want to touch on Slayer and Breaker, because we did get new ones, and I personally hate them. I do not like them compared to the old counterparts. At least the Slayer Dramon. I think the new Breaker Dramon is better than the old Breaker Dramon, but I like the old Slayer Dramon because of how unique that card was compared to this new one.
Yeah, because I mean, with the new Slayer Dramon, it has piercing for the red. It also has on play when digivolving, so it could theoretically work with the old Xmon from EX3 still. Trash any 3 Digivolution cards from your opponent's Digimon, then delete one of their Digimon with no Digivolution cards. Then all turns once per turn, when your opponent's security stack is removed, one of your Digimon with Dracomon or Xmon as text may unsuspend. So this kind of works with the whole idea of swinging multiple times with that Xmon that can already unsuspend multiple times. So that aspect is good in itself right there. And then it also has the inheritable when any of your Digimon with Dracomon or Xmon in their text would leave the battle area other than by battle. You can suspend that Digimon and it doesn't leave. Kind of works similar to how the evade, I guess, works, but it's just not evade text.
It's just more protection. Like it's better than evade. You're on what, Slayer?
Yeah, and then Breaker, it has blocker, on play when digivolving, suspend 2 of your opponent's Digimon or Tamers, then one of your Digimon may attack. So kind of giving you rush, or not rush, what is it? Blitz. That's what the word I'm looking for. Also has all turns once per turn when any of your Digimon with Draco or Examon in their text deletes an opponent's Digimon battle, delete one of their suspended Digimon or Tamers. So this could give you Tamer removal, which doesn't seem bad, honestly, for that aspect. Has an inheritable when any of your Digimon with Draco or Examon in their text deletes an opponent's Digimon in battle, you could delete one of their suspended Digimon or Tamers. So I think the Breaker Dramon's good if you're trying to clear Tamers, but Slayer Dramon, I think I would still prefer the one from EX3.
The new one gives the protection, because it is basically evade but better. When it comes to the protections, and protections are always really, really nice, but I do like the uniqueness of the old one, because the old one goads at the start of the opponent's main phase. So if they are literally relying on one singular stack to move out of raising Evo up, the old Slayer Dramon counters that strategy if you're able to get into it first. Or and because the inheritable basically passes that to the Examon also gains access at that type of an ability. So that's kind of why I really like the old Slayer Dramon. The new one's not bad at all. It's arguably better in what the new Examon would be trying to do, because it's more on brand and it's updated and whatnot. But in terms of where I would play the level 6s, I still kind of like the old one better. And obviously the memory boost that you probably would want to use is the Wisteria gem boost, which is red and blue. So that way you could actually search it out and everything's all hunky-dory with the deck. So yeah, Examon's going to be looking very good, especially since we got his new option, which actually is kind of nuts. So that's usually a thing is these 2 cost options are starting to become like the 1 or 0 cost options that are just absolutely ballistic on value. So the new option, which is Unleash the Dragon Gene, its main ability is like whatever. You can just play a Examon, or you get to play a Draco or Examon texted card for a reduced cost of 3 for 2. So it's basically a 1 memory save when it comes to that. That's why I said like the scrambles are basically like Hammer Sparks, is because most of the time they're just 1 memory saves. So like if you're playing a Drachmon, most of the time they cost 3. This option costs 2. It allows you to play for free. That's where, the Hammer Spark math comes in. But it also has a delay ability. So when you use the main effect, it's a delay option. So it gets played as a delayed card, which allows you to basically act similar to Progenitor, where if it would leave the battle area other than by battle, you get to DNA instead into an Examon, which I think is absolutely nuts. So yeah, it's looking really good. And then its security ability is just whatever. It just plays a Drachmon for free. So nothing too special there. And speaking of more nothing burger cards, we got more Pulsemon and Lugamon stuff. So the Pulsemon is cost reduction when you're digivolving. So I guess technically digivolution reduction. And then the Altern's ability lets you gain memory when you delete an opponent's Digimon by battle. So again, just whatever. We've seen these types of abilities 1.5 million times before. Same thing with the Lugamon, just plus 2,000 inheritable, and it's a searcher. Which actually, thinking about it now, this is the first time we have a Lugamon searcher. We didn't have a dedicated searcher for the deck before this Lugamon. So I found that to be kind of hilarious. But it's looking more specifically for SOC in Seeker cards and also in AG. So yeah, it's just a stereotypical searcher. Then the last couple spoilers that we got are also just more nothing burgers. So we got Pinamon, which I think is kind of interesting, allowing you to digivolve for a reduced cost when an XL traded Digimon is played. So it's trying to like support a crisscross DNA style. I don't think it's going to work very well. It would be better if it was all turns. But yeah. And then we got a Loader Leomon and a Chromon. So the Loader Leomon, what is this actually doing? Oh, it's just, it's a Floodgate. So it minuses 3,000 DP to one of the opponent's Digimon, and they can't activate when digivolving effects. Very good effect. Then the inheritable is a redirect. So not blocker, but blocker. And Chromon is even worse. Not saying Loader Leomon's bad. Loader Leomon is arguably actually a really good card, especially since it still has Leomon in its name, so it could actually be used with the old stuff. But Chromon is also just kind of a giant nothing burger. Just minus 4,000 DP as an inheritable when you're attacking with your Digimon, which is whatever. It's not sticky, so that makes it bad by default. Because there's a lot of protections out there, and you'd rather have sticky than not sticky. And if the deck doesn't have enough to stack, then the minus 4k is just fine. That's all it is. It's just fine. Then it's on plane when Digivolve is just DP boosting, and then one of your Digimon can attack. So, again, we've seen these abilities 1.5 million times already, and they're just okay. It's not the deck really doesn't seem, as of right now, like it's coming too well together, and it still isn't solving the issue that is plaguing literally every other deck in the entire game, where if they're not hyper efficient, you're just not playable as a deck. And as of right now, I do not see this deck being hyper efficient enough, let alone having any meaningful protections or whatever. But that could change with more spoilers until we get the rest of the evolution line. So hopefully it turns out okay, and most likely it seems like these parts and pieces will just be fused inside of, green Leomon, and it'll just turn to green-yellow Leomon. Which means, do we have the boost for green yellow? I think we do,
We
don't
have
we?
a green and purple one, a green and blue one, and then a yellow purple. I don't think we have a dedicated green and yellow.
I'm double checking real quick. Options and uh, if this will let me. Uh, I should actually I could just scroll to the bottom, right? And then the boosts are there.
I think you have
Uh,
to search the LM set for the boost.
yeah, that's always annoying. Using
Like they're
search
promos,
engines.
but they're under LM if I remember correctly.
Yeah, so we do. Oh, we have black and we don't have green yellow, which is unfortunate. But we have the closest one that the deck would be able to use is probably black and yellow, which is okay. It's not ideal. We'd prefer green and yellow, but a lot of the cards are part black anyway, so maybe that could work. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how things develop, because it doesn't seem like one of the bigger design flaws with Digimon, in my perspective, is they design too much in a vacuum and they don't actually think about outside cards and how they're going to be impacting or affecting what we currently have. Sometimes they do, but it really doesn't seem like they do. So they're just like, oh, this seems like it's a really cool effect. It'll play like this. And then we use it and it's broken wide open because they didn't actually stop to think how this card works. But that's just my perspective. So those are the spoilers that we currently have. And I think the set is going to be very interesting to see how it unfolds as more things get spoiled. Obviously, Japan is going to be playing with it a little. No, I think that we get these almost at the same time, don't we? So
Darn near.
yeah, because I think they're
Because
getting
we
this
get
set.
2.5 in February, and I don't remember when they get it, but
I think they
if
get this
anything,
in
we're like barely a
February.
month away.
Yeah, like maybe they'll have like a little bit of extra time to play with it before we do, but we should honestly be getting these around the same time. So I think this is the first set that's really going to be unified. So we'll all be experimenting together on what the heck these new cards will do. But this is kind of where I just hope that they fix the game after Nationals, because if they don't, then none of these matter.
None of these,
Or,
yeah.
yeah, the majority of these fun decks just already don't matter, but they especially won't matter if the game is not fixed. At least, like, some of them could be, like, rogue contenders, based
Like
on the
Nexamon, I feel
support.
like could.
Yeah, like, if Examon is not fast enough to keep up with the meta, then he's like, these cards seem really good and they're really cool and he could be a really, like, in a really interesting spot. But if he just can't compete, he just can't compete. Like, that was Examon's problem before, is he was just too slow for where the meta was at and he just got left in the dust, and that's why, like, nobody really plays him anymore. But maybe these new cards will definitely help reinvigorate not only just people's interest to experiment, but maybe they actually will be good enough to allow him to compete. But based on where the game currently is, if they really need to do some massive changes to try to make things more interactive, and I'm not solely blaming it on like the hybrids or just the OTK decks, which is weird that they want to make more of them yet remove them at the same time. I don't know. They have some really weird double standards that they're following, but yeah, that's basically just the big sentiment is like these are fun. They'll be interesting. We need more information to see how things are actually going to shape up, and we also need a ban and restriction list to try to help fix the game, because the game is definitely not going to be fixing itself. So, any final words to kind of round out this episode? I know things were a little bit jumbled in terms of the order we usually keep things in, but any final thoughts?
Yeah, so for me, obviously, NAS is coming up, and I mean, Anitsu's data kind of shows what you can expect and everything. So just make sure you're prepared for that kind of stuff. I mean, if you're not going to be playing those three decks, maybe you're just going to ask, hey, I'm just going to play for fun. I really don't think I was going to go far and everything. I mean, just make sure you have a good time and everything. Make sure you do side events, whatever you got to do to make the best out of your trip for that. But if you're going to be trying to actually competing for nats and everything, please take a look because this is the data that we have available, not including like on any online tournaments from like Gaia Force Gaming or anything like that. So to say, this is based on actual like Bandai sponsored tournaments, so to say.
Yeah.
So look over it and make sure you're prepared for it.
Yep. That's all I can really say too. Is just be as prepared for the competitive environments that you're playing in. This data does tend to help skew people's interpretations of where things are and where they're going to be going. So I might try to do some meet and greets at nationals. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how the Nationals is actually going to be playing out. I don't know how good the event is going to be ran. So I'll obviously tell more when I can. So on that note, I want to thank everyone for listening and making it all the way to the end as always. So thank you all, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. And I'll see you all, or will see you all, in the next video or episode. Later.